What if I told you that one of the coldest, most calculating men you've ever seen had finally met someone who could make him feel? Eduardo never believed in love. For him, feelings were just distractions that led to failure. Relationships, only temporary agreements. Emotions, just weakness. He had always had everything under control until the day Clara crossed his path. She was everything he avoided. Spontaneous, intense, impossible to ignore. While he saw the world as numbers and contracts, she saw colors and possibilities. And for the first time, someone challenged him. But here's the question. Can a man without a heart really learn to love? Or when he finally realizes it, will it be too late? Get ready for a story where the unexpected happens, where a billionaire who has always run away from feelings discovers that some things can't be controlled or bought. Eduardo never believed in love. For him, feelings were just distractions, weaknesses that made people waste time and make mistakes. He built his fortune on logic, strategy, and an unshakable ability to separate business from emotions. He had it all, or at least everything he believed was important. That evening, as he walked through the hall of a gala event, his presence was noticed by everyone. Men shook his hand in search of lucrative partnerships, and women cast discreet glances his way, hoping to be the next passing conquest. But Eduardo didn't care. He never cared. It was then that he spotted Clara. She didn't belong in that world. Unlike the other women, she wasn't wearing an exorbitant dress or a rehearsed smile. Her gaze was curious, as if she was analyzing everything around her without being impressed. Eduardo frowned. Who was she, and why was she looking at him like that? He didn't have to wait long to find out. A few minutes later, she approached him. "Eduardo Vasconcelos," she said, crossing her arms. "The man without a heart." He arched an eyebrow. "Excuse me, but have we met before?" "Not personally, but his name appears in all the newspapers. Cold, ruthless businessman, unattainable billionaire. Impressive, but somewhat predictable." She challenged him. Eduardo didn't know whether to find it irritating or intriguing. "And you are?" "Clara, just Clara. And what exactly is just Clara doing here?" She smiled. "Working, photography. Unlike you, I like to record real moments." Eduardo let out a slight laugh. "Real moments? That sounds like too romantic a concept for an event like this." "That's because you've never seen life beyond numbers." He tilted his head, studying her. "And what exactly makes you think you can judge me?" "I'm not judging you. I'm just stating the obvious." Clara held Eduardo's gaze firmly, and he realized that, for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't intimidated by him. "Well, Clara, if you believe in your worldview so much, why don't you try convincing me?" She took a step forward. "Because I'm not interested in convincing anyone. Some people never change." Eduardo felt something different, an irritation mixed with curiosity, but before he could say anything, Clara walked away. He stood there watching her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, Eduardo realized that someone had made him question his own existence. Eduardo shouldn't have been thinking about her. In the days following the event, he went about his routine unchanged. Meetings, contracts, negotiations. Everything happened with the predictability he liked. But from time to time, the memory of the woman who had challenged him would pop into his mind. Clara. It was annoying. He didn't allow anyone to occupy his thoughts, let alone someone so irrelevant to his life. But fate had other plans. That morning, while he was reviewing reports in his office, his assistant walked in with a tablet in her hands. "Mr. Vasconcelos, the event organizers have sent the official photographs. They need your approval before publication." He picked up the device and started going through the images. People smiling, businessmen shaking hands, boring speeches, nothing out of the ordinary. Until he saw a different photo. It was of him, but it wasn't an ordinary picture. It wasn't posed or calculated. He was serious, staring into nothingness, lost in thought. The soft light highlighted the subtle tiredness in his eyes. It was a photograph that captured more than his appearance. It captured something that Eduardo had always hidden, and the photographer's name at the bottom of the image, Clara. Eduardo frowned. She had photographed him without him realizing it. And somehow she had captured something that he had never let anyone else see. "Who hired this photographer?" he asked, closing the tablet. The assistant consulted her records. "She was recommended by one of the event's sponsors. Her name is Clara Mendez. Do you want me to request any changes to the images?" He was silent for a moment before answering. "No. Leave it as it is." Later that evening, Eduardo left a meeting and on an impulse grabbed his cell phone. He didn't usually make decisions without planning, but this time he just typed the message and sent it. "Eduardo, I want to talk to you." A few minutes later the reply came. "Clara." "Wow. The Heartless man sends personal messages. What happened? Did you lose a bet?" Eduardo rolled his eyes but strangely smiled. "Eduardo, I just want to talk." Clara. "About?" Eduardo. "About your photo." This time she took a little longer to answer. Clara. Do you want to know how you managed to look like a human in the photo?" He let out a light laugh, something rare. Eduardo. "Where are you?" Clara. "In a cafe, but I don't think it's your kind of place." Eduardo took out his car keys. "Eduardo, send me the address." 15 minutes later he arrived. It was a small cafe, nothing fancy, without the luxuries he was used to. Still, the atmosphere was cozy, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. He found her sitting by the window, with a book in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. Seeing him, Clara raised an eyebrow. "I thought billionaires didn't go into places like this." Eduardo pulled out a chair and sat down without asking permission. "I thought you didn't like stereotypes." She smiled and closed the book. "What exactly do you want, Eduardo?" He placed the tablet on the table, displaying the photo she had taken. "I want to know how you did it." Clara looked at the image and then at him. "I just captured what I saw." "And what did you see?" She tilted her head slightly, watching him. Someone who thinks they have everything but doesn't realize what's missing. Eduardo kept his gaze fixed on hers, without answering. At that moment, he knew that Clara wasn't just any photographer. And that was a problem. Eduardo never felt uncomfortable, but Clara seemed to have the gift of throwing him off balance. He wasn't used to being analyzed like that. People feared him, respected him, some even tried to flatter him, but no one ever looked at him, as if they were trying to see something beyond what he was showing. "Don't you like the picture?" Clara asked, breaking the silence. Eduardo looked away from the image on the tablet. "I don't know. I've never seen myself like this." "Then maybe it's time to really see yourself." She took a sip of her tea and crossed her arms, as if she expected him to refute her, but he just remained silent, analyzing her. "Do you always talk like that?" "Like what?" "As if you were reading people?" Clara smiled. "Only those who try to hide who they really are." Eduardo laughed lightly and leaned back in his chair. "And what else do you think you know about me?" She pretended to think for a moment. "You like control. You need to feel like you have power over everything, but deep down, you know that's not possible, and that scares you." He arched an eyebrow. "Interesting theory." "It's not a theory. It's what I see." Her gaze was so firm that Eduardo felt a real discomfort. He was used to controlling any situation, but with Clara, he felt the game was different. "Do you like teasing people like that?" "Only those who need to be provoked." She smiled, picked up her bag and stood up. "Well, that was fun. Until next time, Eduardo." "Who says there will be a next time?" She winked, amused. "You." And she left, leaving him alone with his untouched cup of coffee. Over the next few days, Eduardo tried to ignore the impact of that conversation, but for some reason he couldn't forget Clara. Then something unusual happened. He was in a meeting when his assistant entered the room with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Vasconcelos, perhaps this will interest you." Eduardo took the tablet and looked at the screen. It was a story from a small news website about a social project for underprivileged children. And the main image in the article, Clara. She was surrounded by children, smiling, holding a camera, and showing something to an attentive group. The text explained that she was taking part as a volunteer, teaching photography to young people without access to formal education. Eduardo frowned. What is this? It seems that Miss Clara has been working on this project for years. It's a voluntary thing. He stared at the screen for a few seconds. Without saying anything, he picked up the phone and typed in a message. Eduardo, can we talk? The reply came quickly. Clara, wow, did you miss me? Eduardo, I found an article about you. Do you teach photography to children? This time it took her a little longer to reply. Clara, yes, but why do you care? He hesitated. Why did he care? Eduardo, I want to see the project up close. Clara, what do you want? Eduardo, you heard me. Tell me where and when. There was a long pause before he answered. Clara, tomorrow, 10 in the morning, don't be late. Eduardo smiled. He didn't know exactly why he was doing this. All he knew was that he wanted to see Clara one more time. Eduardo wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but one thing was certain, he didn't belong there. The next morning he arrived at the address sent by Clara. The neighborhood was completely different from the luxurious environments The streets were simple, the buildings weathered, and children ran barefoot on the sidewalks. He parked his imported car and got out, feeling curious looks on his face. His impeccable suit definitely made him a stranger there. Then he saw Clara. She was on the other side of the courtyard, surrounded by children who laughed and watched intently as she held up a camera and showed something to one of the boys. For a moment, Eduardo just watched. It was a side of her he didn't know, a side that seemed more real than anything he had ever seen. Then she saw him. Clara arched an eyebrow, smiling as she walked over to him. Wow, you really came. Did you think I wouldn't come? To be honest? No. Eduardo looked around, analyzing his surroundings. What exactly are you doing here? Clara crossed her arms. I teach photography to children. They've never had the chance to learn something like this. It's a way of giving them a new view of the world. He frowned. You do it for free? Yes. And that pays your bills? She laughed. No, Eduardo, but not everything in life is about money. He was silent for a moment. Have you always been like this? Clara shrugged. I've always tried to do something that matters. Unlike certain people who think that money solves everything. He let out a low laugh. You love teasing me, don't you? I love to show you the truth. Before Eduardo could answer, a little girl tugged at Clara's blouse. Teacher, is he your boyfriend? Clara's eyes widened in surprise. What? No, no. Eduardo smiled. Why did you ask? The girl shrugged. You look at her differently. Clara was speechless. Eduardo just watched her reaction, amused. I think you've already made a smart student. She sighed and took the girl's hand. Come on, let's take some pictures before you start making up more stories. Eduardo stood there, watching her walk away. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something different, something he couldn't name. Hours later, Eduardo was still thinking about the morning he had spent on Clara's project. He was in the office, reviewing contracts, but his mind kept returning to her. Without thinking too much, he picked up his phone and sent a message. Eduardo, I need to talk to you. Clara, do you miss me already? He smiled, but got straight to the point. Eduardo, dinner with me tonight. This time, the answer took longer. Clara, is that an invitation or an order? Eduardo, which would you prefer? Clara, an invitation. But I'm still thinking about it. Eduardo, I'll pick you up at 8 p.m. Clara, I didn't say yes. Eduardo, but I didn't say no either. She didn't reply after that, but Eduardo knew she would be there, and for the first time, he wanted someone to be. The restaurant Eduardo chose was elegant, discreet, with low lighting and tables far enough apart to guarantee privacy. He arrived first, not because he was anxious, of course, just out of habit. Eduardo always liked to arrive first, to assess the atmosphere, to control the setting, But this time he felt something different as he waited, and when Clara walked in, he realized that the strange feeling was only growing. She wore a simple dress, nothing extravagant, but the confidence with which she walked drew more attention than any expensive jewelry. She stopped in front of him and crossed her arms. "I didn't tell you I was coming." "But you did." She rolled her eyes, but smiled. "If I were you, I wouldn't count that as a victory." Eduardo pulled out a chair for her, who hesitated before sitting down. "Do you do this with all women?" "What? You look at them as if you're trying to understand what's going on inside their heads." He smiled. "Only with the ones that intrigue me." Clara picked up the menu, looking away. "If this is your way of saying that I'm different, it won't work." "Who says I'm trying?" She laughed and shook her head. "You really are impossible." The waiter appeared, and Eduardo ordered a wine. Clara, on the other hand, refused. "I'll stick with juice." He raised an eyebrow. "Don't you like wine?" "Yes, I do, but wine goes with dates, and this isn't a date." Eduardo leaned slightly on the table. "What is it?" "A desperate attempt to convince me to see you again." He laughed, genuinely. "Does it work?" She picked up the napkin and played with it between her fingers. "I'm still deciding." Dinner continued with conversations that flowed naturally. Eduardo realized that, unlike most of the people he dined with, Clara wasn't interested in impressing him. She didn't measure her words, she didn't filter her opinions, and he liked that more than he should. Then, in the middle of the conversation, Clara said something that caught him off guard. "Answer me something, Eduardo. Have you ever loved anyone?" He was silent for a few seconds. "I like many things, but love has never been one of them." She studied him, as if trying to decipher him. And that was a choice. It was a realization. Or a fear. Eduardo gave her a wry smile. "You love creating theories about me, and you love avoiding answers." The silence between them was interrupted by the waiter bringing dessert, but the question remained in the air, and for the first time, Eduardo didn't know if he had an answer. When he dropped her off at home that evening, Clara hesitated before getting out of the car. "Thank you for dinner." Eduardo looked at her, the soft light of the street lamp illuminating his face. "Can we do it again?" She sighed thoughtfully. "I don't know if I want to get involved with someone who's afraid of feeling." He frowned. "I'm not afraid." "Then prove it." Eduardo didn't know what to say, and Clara just smiled in a corner before getting out of the car. He stood there, looking at the door of the building, feeling a restlessness he had never felt before. And for the first time, he wondered if he was beginning to lose control. Eduardo had never been a man who regretted decisions. He made choices, moved on, and dealt with the consequences without looking back. But ever since Clara had come into his life, this balance had been crumbling. In the days following the dinner, he tried to concentrate on work, on business, on the predictable routine he had always maintained. But her sentence echoed in his mind like an unanswered question. "Then prove it." But how do you prove something you've never felt? It was in the midst of this whirlwind of thoughts that he received some unexpected news. "Mr. Vasconcelos," said his assistant, hurrying into the room, "it seems that Clara Mendez has resigned from the photography project." Eduardo looked up, surprised. "What? I heard she's leaving everything behind." He felt uncomfortable. Without thinking twice, he picked up his phone and typed in a message. "Eduardo, what happened?" Clara took a while to reply. When the message arrived, it was short. "Clara, nothing. I just need to move on." "Eduardo, does this have to do with me?" This time, the answer came more quickly. "Clara, the world doesn't revolve around you, Eduardo." He clutched his cell phone tightly, but somehow he knew it had everything to do with him. That night, Eduardo drove to the neighborhood where Clara lived. He didn't ask permission. He didn't send another message. He just parked the car and waited. When she came out of the building, she immediately noticed him. "What are you doing here?" He got out of the car and approached her, his hands in his pockets. "I want an answer." "I've already given you one." Not this one. I want to know why you're giving up on the project. Clara crossed her arms. Because I need change. I can't spend my whole life trying to change the world on my own. Eduardo looked at her for a moment. You're not alone. She laughed humorlessly. Oh no, you always do that, Eduardo. You show up, throw a few words around and hope people understand you. But that doesn't work with me. He took a deep breath. You want proof, right? I don't want anything more from you. That hurt more than he expected. Clara sighed and looked away. I liked you, but I can't expect a man who has never loved anyone to learn how to do it overnight. Eduardo felt something tighten inside his chest. What if I'm trying? She laughed in disbelief. Trying isn't enough. She started to walk away, but Eduardo grabbed her hand before she could leave. I can lose everything and still be the same, but losing you, I don't know who I'll be after that. Clara was paralyzed. But instead of answering, she let go of his hand slowly and walked into the building without looking back. Eduardo stood there, alone, realizing that for the first time, no amount of money could solve this problem, and that perhaps he had just lost the only thing that really mattered. Eduardo had never known what it was like to really lose something. He had built his life without ties, without emotional dependencies, without anyone who could hurt him. But now, standing in front of Clara's building, he felt for the first time the weight of what it was like to lose someone who really mattered. He went home that night, but he couldn't sleep. The image of her leaving, the words spoken in pain, all echoed in his mind. And then he made a decision. Without hesitating, he picked up the phone and made a call. I want you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow. I need to make an announcement. What about, sir? Eduardo took a deep breath. About something that finally matters. The next day, Clara was distractedly looking at her cell phone when she received a message from a friend. Friend, turn on the TV now. It's about Eduardo. She frowned and picked up the remote. The live broadcast showed Eduardo in front of a crowd of reporters. He was serious, but his gaze had an intensity that Clara had never seen before. I invited you here because for the first time I have something important to say that doesn't involve business or numbers. The journalists looked at each other, confused. Eduardo continued, I spent my life believing that feelings were weakness. But I discovered that the real weakness is running away from them, and that's why I'm here, to admit that I made a mistake. Clara felt her heart race. There is someone who has shown me that the world is much bigger than I realized. And that person is listening to me now. Eduardo paused, took a deep breath, and then looked directly at the camera. Clara, I love you. The studio was silent for a second before the journalists started muttering and typing furiously into their cell phones. But Clara heard nothing but her own heart beating fast. It was then that a new message arrived. Eduardo, I'm waiting for you. Clara didn't think. She just grabbed her keys and left. When she arrived at the press conference, Eduardo was already alone. The journalists had left, but he was still there, waiting. She got out of the car slowly, her heart racing. Eduardo took a step forward without taking his eyes off her. I meant it. Clara crossed her arms, trying to remain firm. You didn't have to do that on national television. I needed you to know that I'm not that man anymore. She took a deep breath. What if I'm still afraid to believe it? Eduardo smiled. Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can trust me. The silence between them was intense, charged with everything that remained unresolved. Then Clara smiled. I never imagined that a man without a heart could really love. Eduardo held her hand firmly. Neither did I. But you taught me how. And this time, he didn't let her go.